is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
If we play 31 games in our regular season, if we're really good at these 4 things, we'll probably win 26. But if we start trying to be really good at 15 things, then are we really going to be good enough? So that's the battle constantly. There are so many things that you can do, but should we?
Brandon Ubel will be entering his 4th season as a men's basketball assistant coach at the University of South Dakota. Prior to his time at South Dakota, Ubel was the director of scouting at the University of Utah for 1 season in 2021-22. Ubel began his coaching career as a graduate assistant coach at Utah State from 2019 to 2021. Brandon was a 4-year standout at the University of Nebraska from 2009 to 2013. He played his first 3 seasons under Doc Sadler and his senior season under Tim Miles. Ubel appeared in 125 games and started 89 for the Huskers. In his senior season as team co-captain, Ubel averaged 11.5 points per game and finished 7th in the Big Ten with 6.7 rebounds per game. In addition to his success on the court, Ubel was a 3-time academic All-American, earned the 2012 Nebraska HERO Leadership Award, and was a nominee for the Big Ten Sportsmanship Award in 2013. Following his collegiate career, Ubel played 5 seasons overseas in Belgium and France before beginning his coaching career in 2019. Hey Hoopheads, this month only our friends at Dr. Dish Basketball are giving you an exclusive $2,000 off, plus free shipping on your purchase of a Dr. Dish CT Plus, All-Star Plus, or Rebel Plus. Hurry to secure your savings before June 30th or while supplies last. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on a Dr. Dish Rebel Plus, All-Star Plus, and CT Plus models. Those are some great deals, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi there, this is De'Ami Starks, trainer and player development coach for All Iowa Attack, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
You want to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Brandon Ubel, men's basketball assistant coach at the University of South Dakota. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klimsing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to be joined by Brandon Ubel, men's basketball assistant coach at the University of South Dakota. Brandon, welcome to the Hoopheads pod.
Thank you very much. Happy to be on.
Excited to have you on. Looking forward to diving into all the interesting things that you've been able to do in your career, both as a player and as a coach. Let's start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell me about some of your first experiences with the game of basketball. What made you fall in love with it?
Was always just into sports in general. My first basketball memory, though, sitting on my grandma's floor, watching, I believe, Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Michael Jordan hits the shot at Utah, where people claim he pushed off, but I mean, that's a normal basketball play, in my opinion.
Exactly.
We could probably argue that one for a little bit, but no, I mean, I've kind of always loved basketball, played a ton of sports growing up, but that was kind of always the one, and then I was tall growing up, but then kind of late bloomer-ish, sophomore year went from 6 foot to about 6'8". And then that's kind of when things kind of started to heat up a little bit basketball wise in high school. So I always loved it. But then, the skill and the size and stuff kind of all started to gel together in high school. And I played at Blue Valley West High School for Donnie Campbell. So some people might understand the reference here, but Ted Lasso, if you've ever watched that show, Jason Sudeikis, he played for Donnie Campbell and based his characters, like mannerisms and everything, on Coach Campbell. And so if you ever watched Ted Lasso, like that was my high school coach, essentially. But no, he was a great coach, Bobby Knight, traditional motion. So learned how to play and read the game under him, and was really, really fortunate to play for him. He's won a ton of games at the high school level. We won a state title when I was in high school there, and then played summer ball with the Wedman Pumas. Played for Scott Wedman, who played for the Celtics for a long time, played for the Kansas City Kings when they were a thing for 2 years. And back when there weren't shoe circuits or anything like that. So we're really going back now, if you think about the landscape nowadays. And then, kind of into that junior year of high school, heading into senior year, recruitment and everything picked up, and had quite a few offers, ended up going to Nebraska. So, I mean, obviously that's a lot to cover in a short amount of time, but I've always loved the game, but kind of a late bloomer in terms of things kind of coming together for me.
Were you still playing other sports prior to that growth spurt in high school? Were you still playing formally on teams?
Yeah, I was playing baseball. I was exclusively pitching, and to be honest with you, baseball was more about hanging out with my boys. All my good friends, we all played a lot of the same sports. So we went straight from basketball season, then we would play baseball, and then we would play stuff in the summer, and then so I was playing baseball through my sophomore year of high school, and then that sophomore year is kind of when, kind of the AAU stuff, the summer stuff and recruitment is really picking up. And that got to be a little bit too much in terms of we were on the road, we were playing basketball. I was going straight from baseball practice to basketball practice. And so decided that was kind of the end of it, especially because it was just, to be honest, I wasn't great. So I was just I was on the team. I was chewing seeds, sitting in the dugout, hanging out with my boys. So
there you go.
So really focused in on basketball there later on. Yeah.
What did that focus look like for you as a high school player in terms of getting better? Obviously, as you just talked about, the way that basketball players develop and the way the youth basketball scene environment looks like today compared to what it was like when you were playing. What was your off season what did that look like? How'd you try to go about getting better as a player?
I was super lucky. My high school coach, I mentioned, Donnie Campbell, he gave me a key to the gym. And so I was able to get into the gym, get up shots. If they were doing, any camps or any other sport was in there, he would let me go in the side gym. And so I was always kind of had that access. And then, when in the summer seasons with the Pumas and in that program, Scott Wedman, I would go basically right from school. I'd go home, I'd get a snack, and then I would drive about 45 minutes north in Kansas City, where I'm originally from, and I would work out with Coach Wedman, and kind of just one-on-one workout for about an hour. And then after that, we would have our team practice, and that would go for probably 2 hours there at night, and then I would get home around 9 p.m. So, and our school went later. So in spring ball, we were traveling in April. So it really started kind of as soon as we could after our high school season. So that was kind of the routine there was, 3-4 times a week. I was right after school, I was driving up, and then I was there for about 3 or 4 hours. And then on the days that I wasn't, I was in our high school gym shooting or doing whatever I could there. So It was a lot, but it was one of those things where you look back on it and you think, man, that was a big time commitment, but it was just like, this is what I do.
Right.
So obviously it didn't end up paying off. But yeah, I was super, super fortunate to have really good coaches and really good individual trainers, probably in a time before the trainer became a thing, which probably feels like past 6 or 7 years. Now everybody's got a trainer now. So,
For sure. I was going to say you were a little bit ahead of your time with having the opportunity to work with Wedman on that individual basis. You think about, as you said, the way the training business has exploded and the way the kids that you're coaching today, the amount of time that they're spending working with trainers compared to the average person back in the time when you were playing. What do you remember about those conversations during the time when you were working with Wedman? Forget about like the basketball side of it and the drills and the things you were doing, but what were some of the things that he was talking to you about just in terms of trying to pass along the knowledge that he had, obviously, of being an NBA player and playing at a super high level?
Yeah. When I was in my 16U year, I played up on a 17U team, and I played with a lot of players that ended up going Division I at a pretty high level. Clint Mann ended up going to Iowa State. Garrett Stutz played at Wichita State, and a couple other guys went Division I on our team. And so I was the young guy on that team that was more playing a role. So then when I came back, I kind of just had that mentality on when we came back, and it was like it was going to be my team, I guess you could say.
Right.
And so a lot of it was centered around that being like, you're not passing up shots anymore. You are hunting them. You're like, we almost want you to take bad shots. And so that was kind of the mentality flip of, rather than always making the right play, what the team might have needed at the time was for me to go make something happen. And so, that was an interesting flip, but it was also kind of what, to your point, those conversations during our workouts and then also during practice were just preparing me to showcase what I could do to then get to the next level and continue that way. And that wasn't easy, just to switch your mindset, I guess. But it obviously it really, really helped. And that was a huge, huge part of my development for sure, was the mental side with him.
All right, I'm going to ask you a personal question. So my daughter was a freshman on her high school team this year. There was kind of a senior dominated team. She basically her role was to come in and defend and move the ball to the next person. And I've spent since last off season until right now having those same conversations. It sounds like that Scott Wedman was having with you in terms of getting you to kind of shift. Hey, you got to do stuff. You're no longer just a person standing there. So if you gave me one piece of advice that you remember, something that stuck with you or how you turned the corner, what is it? What can I tell my daughter?
If it was funny, I went one game, I was 6 for 6 from the field, and he was like, "That's an issue." He said that means you're only taking unbelievably perfectly great shots. Like if it's a decent shot, take the decent shot. Like you just have to, like, it was even like, if you take a bad shot, I'm going to clap. If you pass up anything, like, we're going to run, So it wasn't even necessarily one thing. It was just chopping wood a little bit, to kind of one thing after another. Like every time he saw something, it was like, boom, boom, no, like, no, yes. So, I can't say it was necessarily one thing. But yeah, it was a process for sure.
You down, it sounds like that's what it was, wearing you down.
Wearing you down to build you up. That was the way.
All right. Tell me a little bit about the recruiting process, what that was like for you, and then ultimately the decision to attend Nebraska.
Yeah. Recruiting was a little bit different then than it is now. You weren't allowed to text. And I think calls were limited to 1 call a week. And then there was like certain periods where you could get up to 2 calls a week. And so that sophomore to junior year was a few people just calling, sending things. You would get mail way more because you couldn't send a graphic through text.
Right.
So much less like direct conversations than it was, just receiving different things in the mail. And then that junior to senior spring and summer is when things really took off. Just I was a 6'9", 6'10", 4'5". I could shoot a little bit. I could handle a little bit. I wasn't like an amazing athlete, but I wasn't a bad athlete. So just started to kind of get the attention. And then once the first offer came in, I believe it was Drake that offered me. Mark Phelps was the head coach at the time. Kareem Richardson was the assistant recruiting me. Once that one came in, it was almost like the floodgates open up a little bit. And then, the live periods, the recruiting periods, there were more of them and they were longer. So there was just way more opportunities for coaches to be in the gym and see us play. And so, my sister actually ran track at Nebraska, so I was familiar with it. And then, was starting to take some like unofficial visits and seeing campuses and things and all those, kind of during the end of that summer before school year started, and was narrowing in. And, Nebraska was definitely they were in the Big 12 at the time. So I had grown up in Big 12 country in Kansas. And so that was super intriguing to me. I had some offers out at Stanford and Cal and Marquette and some things in different areas of the country, but the opportunity to play at Kansas and to play at Iowa State and at Texas and the teams I grew up watching, was awesome. Plus the familiarity, having my sister there. It was far enough away from home. About 3-hour drive, but not too far away. A lot of things came into it, but then, I believe it was August or so when people could start calling 2 times a week. And man, it was, you were on your cell phone and the home phone would ring. And so then you would call the person back on the home phone and then your cell phone would ring. And it was like all day, every day there for a little while. And it was just like, all right, I think I know where I want to go. And at this point, I'm just spending my day on the phone, and I think I know what I want to do here. And the coach at the time was Doc Sadler, and they did an awesome job recruiting me and building a great relationship, the assistants and everybody, and had been to campus a few times. And so finally kind of shut everything down, probably earlier than most would have, before taking official visits and all that good stuff.
Who was the most difficult no?
That's a really good question. Probably Greg Marshall at Wichita State. Like I mentioned, a friend of mine that played AAU with me that was a year older had gone there and was having a good experience. And they were still in the Valley at the time and winning 28 to 30 games. And Coach Marshall's an intense dude, obviously. And Coach Chris Jans was the assistant recruiting me at the time. So obviously they had a heck of a staff there that was just doing a great job. And that was probably the toughest one for me. And it was, in state and all that fun stuff. But I think at the end of the day, I knew I was making the right choice for me.
And into your freshman year, what are you thinking about academically, career-wise? Are you the typical 18-year-old that you kind of have no idea what you're going to do and you're kind of focused on playing hoops? Obviously, mentioning Cal and Stanford, obviously you're a really good student, but just where was your mindset at as you were entering school?
Yeah, so I actually knew what I wanted to study. I was a broadcast journalism major, funny enough, being on a podcast now. So I enjoyed everything with whether the behind the camera stuff, producing, putting the edits together, the weatherman stuff. Like we were doing all that stuff for our high school TV show. And so I kind of fell in love with that. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do that way. And that actually helped, obviously, with some of the college stuff was that's what I wanted to study. So kind of going in, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. And, it was a pretty unique deal. Not everybody's just, broadcast journalism, but yeah, that I knew right away, which made me probably a little bit more unique, especially at the higher levels.
At all on your radar at this point, or no?
Probably not right away, as like going into college. That probably developed later on. I knew even with the broadcast journalism stuff, I wanted to be around basketball. Like if I were in broadcast journalism, my golden dream or whatever would have been like being on College Game Day, and doing that type of stuff, or being a play-by-play or color commentator or something like that. I think would have been the dream job that way. But I knew I wanted to be around basketball. So that the coaching piece definitely developed later on in college. But that was more so my senior year where I started to kind of have those thoughts about it.
What's your favorite memory on or off the court from your time at Nebraska?
Oh, wait. I loved my time at Nebraska. every year, every second. There was a lot of change there. When I was there after my sophomore year, we switched to the Big Ten. So, the opportunity to play at one university and kind of develop at one university, but still also have the opportunity to play at all of those cool places in the Big 12 and in the Big 10. I mean, you're talking about some of the most historic places in the country, and without transferring, I was able to do that. I think that was pretty cool, especially looking back at the landscape now. On the court for sure. We beat on my sophomore year. We beat Texas when they were ranked number 1. They had an awesome team. I think it was Avery Bradley and Jordan Hamilton and Tristan Thompson. Like, they were loaded, and they were ranked number 1, and we beat them at home and rushed the court and all that. That was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed my time in Nebraska overall. I mean, there's good people. I had a lot of good coaches. I went through coaching changes even during my time, and just that whole environment was great for me and was awesome for my development on and off the court.
Tell me about something from one of your college coaches that you took with you that you still feel like is a part of who you are today as a coach, whether it's a personal characteristic, whether it's just the way they went about their business, whether it's something that they specifically taught you that you still think about and share with guys that you're coaching today. Just what's something that stands out to you that you still carry with you from your time as a player at Nebraska?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I'll give you a couple answers because I played for a couple different guys. Doc Sadler, he was, we were a very defensive minded team. We were an extremely tough team. We grounded out at times offensively, but you knew what we were going to do. We were going to guard you. We were going to be tough. We were going to be physical. And I was not that coming in. I was, some could say I was soft. I was the skilled shooting big, stereotypical that guy. So just the, you probably don't appreciate it as much while you're in it. But then when you look back now, especially as a coach, taking that, his principles and just getting us to buy into exactly what we were going to do and be flying around and committed to it. And we did not budge on our system. like we were going to do what we were going to do, and we were going to do it better than anybody else. And so that, I think, you look back on that now as a coach and you're just like, man, we played really hard for that dude. And I think a lot of that went into, he was really tough on us on the court, but he had built these relationships and you knew he cared about you, off the court. And as soon as that 4 hours was done at times, which was a long day, or 2 hours or hour and a half, whatever we went, you knew, like, he was able to do such a good job of switching that, flipping that switch to then, check in with you and make sure everything's good. You knew he cared, and that made you play even harder for him. With Coach Miles, I think Tim Miles, who I played for my senior year, when he came in, it was a very similar thing with Scott Wedman. Was just the power of belief, right? Is what he gave me, saying that, no, you can be one of our best players. You can be a go-to guy. We're gonna put the ball in your hands. You can do these things. So kind of that evolution of being one of the guys to one of, like, a guy on the team again. I think then that really propelled me to be a pro and be given an opportunity to play in Europe. And I've always remembered that, that the power of just one coach, it can be an assistant, it can be a head coach, it can be anybody, to truly and fully believe in a player and give that to them. I mean, that's special. So I think that's definitely something that I've taken from him, is to always make sure I remember, I'm telling the guys that I'm working with and the guys on the team, like, no, man, like, you are awesome. Like, you are a really good player. You can do X, Y, and Z for us, and making sure that they know that every day. And I think that's something I really took from him.
It's really an important lesson to remember. And it's sort of an offshoot of something that I've talked about with lots of different coaches on the podcast, Brandon, and that is that when you think about yourself as a coach and the interactions that you have with players, you have things that, when you think about your time as a player, that coaches said to you that you remember, that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your life, that had an impact, are probably continuing to have an impact, and are going to have an impact on you for the rest of your life. And yet, probably if you went back and you asked one of those coaches, hey, do you remember when you said X to me? Chances are that coach has no recollection of that particular interaction. And I think sometimes as coaches, or my day job as a teacher, I think sometimes you forget that your words do have that kind of power that you just described, where here's a guy who just believed in you, told you could do it, said, hey, you're capable of doing this. And that gave you the strength, the mentality, the ability to then go out and do those things. And it speaks to the power of our words as coaches, as teachers, that we sometimes forget. Now, kids don't remember everything we say, obviously. we certainly wish they did, but they certainly pick and choose. And there's things that, again, may seem innocuous to us that they end up taking with them that has an impact on them for the rest of their lives. And it's always one of the things that I try to keep in mind whenever I'm interacting with, whether it's players or students, is that I could be talking to someone who 20 years from now, 30 years from now is going to be having a conversation just like this and saying, hey, I remember when Coach Klinzing said this to me, and man, that really had an impact on me in the moment, and it's continuing to have an impact on me. And I think sometimes we forget how powerful those words can be as a coach.
No question. I mean, that's nailed it on the head right there. I mean, it's, I've heard it from a few different people, but when you get it, when you experience it or you see it firsthand, I mean, it can kind of change your view, on some of those things, and on what sticks with you. Like you said, it can be something that, like you said, it's just, we might forget it, or not even remember that we said that or did that for somebody, but it meant something. And you try to remember that can happen, because I know, like, you know how it is in the season. You can just kind of get into this malaise and this routine of scouts practice, shots up, scouts practice, shots up, like all those things, and you can forget to just like have a real conversation with somebody, about like, hey, how's your family doing, like, and just like,
Right.
hey, do you want to go, grab a bite to eat quick, and just something small like that might feel small is really big for some guys, and trying to remember that through winning games, is difficult at times, but the more we can do that, I think those two things are very, very correlated.
100% right. And as you said, it's sometimes difficult to see through the haze of winning and losing and the grind of what a season involves and the amount of time that everybody's putting in to try to win as many games as possible. And it's important to sometimes step back, right, to remember that human touch of everybody needs something. Everybody needs that kind of human connection, that relationship. And when you can step back and remember that, I think everybody ends up in a better place. And more often than not, you win more games when you build better relationships, right? When you have, whether that's player-coach relationships, whether that's coach-coach relationships, whether it's player-to-player relationships, when you have a team that is strong in all those areas, you end up, I think, with a better record on the floor, wins and losses. And you also end up with a better experience when you have all those kinds of positive relationships. When you finish at Nebraska, obviously you get an opportunity to go and play overseas. So walk me through, from the time your season ends as a senior at Nebraska, how do you go about taking those steps that were necessary to get yourself that opportunity to play overseas?
Yeah, kind of during the season, probably pretty similar to how it is now. There's agents that start hitting you up, maybe for different reasons. But yeah, so, some agents had just said, we'd love to talk to you after the season, and, about representation and those types of things. And Coach Miles has had quite a few guys that went overseas and played at a pretty high level in Europe. And so he had some connections there and knew some people that, he could kind of help guide me, or at least say like, yeah, I know that person, and I know they do a good job, or I don't know them at all, which is almost just as good of advice. So started to kind of have those conversations, and then fairly quickly, had found representation, signed with Adam and Ben Pensack. They have kind of their own, it's a smaller agency, more so focused on Europe. Right. Some of the bigger agencies they can be humongous, and they've got their NBA sector, and they've got their Asia and Europe and all that stuff. And I kind of knew my game and those types of things would really fit well and fit best in Europe. And so I knew that, somebody that was really dialed in there, would probably be the best thing for me. And then from there, it was, kind of just, hey, here's a few opportunities. What do you think of this? And I mean, it's a little bit like recruiting process, maybe a little less relationship based and more so, here's the money, here's the opportunity, here's the country, here's what I think, what do you think? And then in the next 4 or 5 days, you're either saying yes or no. So a little bit like the transfer portal, probably for a lot of people now, that little bit like speed dating. But yeah, it was a little bit like that. And so actually pretty quick, I had signed with a team in Belgium, in Brussels, and had kind of had locked that in before I think school was even done, which is pretty unique once you get into the Europe world. Typically you're signing your contract June or July, or agreeing to your deals later in the summer, and so had kind of locked that up pretty quickly, and so then I could really just focus on staying in shape, working out, making sure I was ready when I got over there.
Any concerns, worries as a 22-year-old guy going overseas by yourself to a new country. Just what was your thought process in terms of, hey, this is my quote first real job. It's still basketball, but you're going overseas to a new country that I assume you hadn't been to before. So what was the thought process in that? Forget about the basketball side of it, just culturally going to Europe and playing in a new place.
I think you're crazy if you say you're not nervous going over there your first time, or even any time for that matter, because a lot of it you're having a phone conversation, maybe a Zoom or Skype back then. But you're going over and you're going to be playing for, living it like with people you don't know and have never met. So that obviously there's some hesitations there that, you're just in the back of your mind. But also I think a big part of it that people forget is just going to the grocery store and trying to figure out, is this milk or is this buttermilk that I'm going to put on my cereal?
Right.
And buttermilk is bad on cereal, if anybody's wondering. So there's definitely some things there that, you're nervous about, and you're wondering where am I going to go get new basketball shoes? Where am I going to do all these things? And you're just going to have to figure it out. And I was definitely more excited than I was nervous. There's no question about that. But yeah, there's some things that are in the back of your head, but I was fortunate enough that my dad growing up, his work had taken him overseas quite a bit for travel. So that was, while I hadn't done that a ton, that was something that was just as an idea was familiar. And so I knew there were good people everywhere, just from that, having my dad do that, had just known that there's good people everywhere, and you can figure it out. You just got to go do it. You got to go figure it out. And so, yeah, I mean, I was 2 feet in, that's for sure. And just went for it.
What's your favorite city that you got a chance to visit while you were there?
Got a chance to visit. Oh boy. So what I did, I tried, there's like a 2-week period or a week and a half period every, I think, February or so, where the national teams get together and they're playing, either qualifying events or something of the sort. So I would try during that week and a half, we would get 4 or 5 days off or so, and I would try and go somewhere that I hadn't been. And then after the season, I think a lot of people, it's like a 10 or 11 month season sometimes. So your first thought is, I'm going home. And I would always make it a point to take a week and try and go somewhere. So I was fortunate enough and blessed, in every way to be able to do it. But I've been a lot of really cool places. My favorite probably is Greece, going to Athens to visit. That was, very, very cool. Just the history, the food, the beaches, the islands, how can you say no to that?
All right. This is the question I prepped you for. Your craziest European basketball story. The best one we've ever had on the podcast. I don't know if you're going to be able to top it, Brandon, because it was pretty crazy. But I'm waiting to hear yours.
Okay, so mine might be a little bit different that way. I had told my agent pretty early on in my career, after hearing probably a lot of the similar crazy horror stories, like keep me in Western Europe, keep me where they pay on time, and keep me where nothing's screwy, and I'll
Sounds
be good.
about right. Sounds right.
So I don't have any experiences like that, but insane deal, less related to basketball, but I was living in Brussels. I don't know if you remember. So there was the shootings in Paris, right? And so that had happened, and they fled to Brussels. The shooters did. So for about 4 or 5 days, the city shut down, right? And they were on a manhunt in the city. And there were tanks going through the streets. They're banging on doors. They're coming into your apartment, searching, and so wondering what's going on. I'm living in a foreign country. They're looking for these guys. Are they next door? And then, so that was crazy. City shuts down for however long. Bad situation, but okay. So then I think 4 or 5 months later, the airport and the train and the tram stop is bombed in Brussels. And so at the time, my sister and her husband were visiting me. And so we had morning practice. So I drive to morning practice. And as soon as I get there, it's 8 a.m. And we get there and everybody's huddled up and they tell us what happened. Airport, tram stop, train station. I call my sister because they don't have a phone. And their plan was, we're walking down to the tram. We're going to take it into the city and we're going to do a couple things today while I was at practice. And so I'm like, they're not answering. Finally get a hold of them. They hadn't left yet. Thank God, because 2 stops down was the tram stop that had gotten bombed. Right.
Wow.
So, talking about like literally down the street from me. And so, in terms of a panic, and family was in town visiting, and, just then you're wondering like, okay, is this over? Are we safe? Are we good? Like, should they fly? Should they leave? Should they stay for 2 more weeks? It was just, that was insane, obviously. So very scary situation. So that's probably a little different than you might have been expecting. But going through that, and then, 2 days after that happened, we were playing a game in our arena. And so going there, you're thinking like, all right, like this is a large gathering of people,
Right.
like this is a sporting event, and so there was definitely, for a couple weeks there, there was a lot of, just that was kind of in the back of your mind, even as you're like warming up for a game, which is, probably not the headspace that you need to be in. But yeah, that was definitely crazy.
Takes, I think, a while to be able to, I would imagine, put that behind you. And even as you said, for a long, long time, I'm sure that it was in the back of your head. I mean, remember after even 9/11, and it took a long time for you to be able to see a plane or hear a plane and not have your first immediate thought go to September 11th. And so I'm sure for you to be in a place where you obviously had spent a lot of time, and I'm sure been to those very places where that occurred, and then to have that happen, and then double it with your sister being in town. And it just, I can only imagine how trying to then put that behind you and focus on basketball, as you said, when you go into a big public gathering and, looking around and saying, "Ooh, boy, that's, hopefully this is behind us." So yeah, that's definitely a crazy story for sure. All right, let's transition into the coaching profession. So tell me about how you go from how's the playing career sort of wraps up, and what's the thought process as the playing career is coming to an end and getting into coaching?
Yeah. So my 5th season overseas, I was playing in France. I was fortunate enough, I was playing really well and playing at a high level. And France is one of the best leagues in the world. It was a ton of fun. And about 2 weeks left in the season, 3rd quarter, screen and roll, go up to catch the ball, you land and you're going to finish, and right knee just boom. And ACL, MCL, meniscus, patella, and broke my leg. I mean, you talk about what else could happen? Nothing. It was all done. And so honestly, at that moment, I had no intentions of not playing. I was going to continue to play. I was going to come back from this or whatever and rehab, recover. And so, I was going through had surgery, going through PT, and Coach Miles was still at Nebraska. And so went up there once I was kind of cleared to start doing some basketball things, kind of went up there, and he was, he's been probably one of my closest mentors, friends, ever since I graduated. And, he let me come to practice every day. He let me be in the office. He let me be in film. He let me do, what not many people would let you do. And so my intent, right, was I'm going to rehab, I'm going to practice, I'm going to get back in shape, and then I'm going to sign and I'm going to go back overseas. And I think it was maybe January, February time. And I'm thinking about things, and I'm on the phone with my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. And, we're talking about, hey, how did today go? And I would say 2 or 3 minutes about, oh yeah, I got some shots up, and then we practiced. And then I would go for 30 or 40 minutes about, I was talking with Coach Miles about this thing for scheme wise, and then I was watching film with this assistant, and then we were, going over their plan for the game, and that was 30 to 40 minutes of the conversation. And it was funny, one day she was just like, do you hear yourself right now? Like, you're clearly more invested, more excited, more into this other side of the game than you are about playing. And it was like one of those realizations of like, you are 100% right. I am. And it wasn't even a physical thing, right? That I wasn't able to come back. It was just there, that mentality shift of like, man, I'm more excited about that. And so kind of made the decision that I wanted to get into coaching. And Craig Smith was an assistant of mine at Nebraska my senior year. And after that, had gotten the head coaching job at South Dakota, was there for 4 years. And then at the time he was at Utah State, right? When I'm rehabbing and all that. And so he ended up having a spot open up as a GA for him at Utah State. And he was like, well, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah. He was like, well, scale of 1 to 10, like if, are you like a 9? I was like a 10, like I'm doing this. And he was like, all right, like, let's do it. Let's go. And so, less than a month later, I'm moving out to Logan, Utah, which, for me, I flew over and lived in Belgium and France and different cities. And like, this was the simplest move that I'd ever made in my life. Like, I'm just going to go out to Utah. That's easy. So yeah, that was kind of the main transition, was just, I finally realized fortunately my wife had that conversation with me of just like, that's where my passion was now. And it was with playing and hooping and doing that for the longest time. But things had changed, and that's where I was now. And so, kind of dove right in.
You know what she was getting into with the life of a coach's wife?
I don't know if either of us knew exactly, but we definitely had a lot of those conversations right before we even got engaged. Was just like, this is what I want to do. And, she's the absolute best. I mean, everything, we've moved, I think there was a stretch there where we moved to 3 different houses within a calendar year, and we're just, rolling with it. And she's been awesome through the whole deal, and my biggest supporter by far. So that has been awesome through everything, obviously. But to say we knew exactly what we were getting into, probably not. I don't think anybody knows, but as close as we could.
Understood.
High school and middle school basketball program directors, listen closely. Coaches are expected to do far more than just coach. You know this. It doesn't matter if you're doing the coaching yourself or you have a full staff of coaches with you. You know very well that coaches handle scheduling, academic issues, parent communication, leadership development, and even mental health concerns for athletes. A lot to deal with. And when coaches are stretched too thin, it impacts the development of athletes, team morale, and the overall success of the program. There are several ways to prevent you or your coaches from feeling overwhelmed. However, I'll tell you one of our favorite ways to keep coaches firing on all cylinders, and that's athlete-driven accountability and organization. Instead of coaches constantly reminding players about assignments, grades, and practice schedules, the programs at Playmaker Planner
put the responsibility back on the athletes. By tracking their own academics, goals, and commitments, student athletes become more self-sufficient, which of course allows the coach to focus on what they love doing most, coaching. Let's find out if the programs from Playmaker Planner can be a complement to what you're already doing. Visit playmakerplanner.com/stop-is-this-for-you to find out more.
What was it about coaching at the very beginning in that first experience at Utah State when you think back to that first year? What was it about coaching that, if you could pinpoint it down to one or two things that really hooked you, that you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. What were those things?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that really clicked. And I think, as a player, you get better yourself and you start to notice things or whatever. But then when you're on the other side of it and you're helping, you're working somebody out and you're working on, these one or two things for the longest time, and then they do it in a game and it works. And then they kind of look over at you like, hey, like, remember that? And I'm like, yeah, like that's what we've been doing. That's why we do this. And that, I think, the first time that happened, and Namish Keda and those guys at Utah State, I was able to, be on the pad with them and work those guys out and get in the gym with them as a GA. And so, just the first time that I was able to say like, hey, like catch it a little bit higher, and then you got more room to spin back. He's playing you on the high side. So then the next time down, he does it and he kind of looks over and it's like, okay, that right there, like that is, you get this rush of like, man, I just helped him out, and that, I think that has been the biggest thing in terms of the light bulb. It was just like, when you're working with somebody, and it's the long game for sure, but then you start to see things click for a kid. And they're starting to make those steps and to add things into their game and start to have more and more success and more belief in themselves. I think that's been the biggest thing to see, and you kind of get that joy out of that for sure.
I think that when you talk about, right, it's that light bulb coming on where players, or again, I equate it back to being a teacher, students, you're teaching them something, you're showing them something, you're trying to explain to them why it's valuable. They don't necessarily see it right away. And then that moment where suddenly it clicks and they're like, oh yeah, now I get it. And yeah, I think as a coach, that's one of, for sure, when you talk about from an individual standpoint, right, of impacting somebody on the floor, I think that's one of the things that a lot of coaches would say is a high for them, right? That the player getting that thing that you've been working on over and over and over again, and then finally it clicks for them in a game situation. That's definitely one of those things that, just lights you up as a coach, but also, again, the player starts to look, and I think looks at you in a different way as a coach too. They're like, hey, maybe this guy's not as dumb as I thought he was. He really does know something. He is able to add some value to what they're doing. What about from an X's and O's standpoint, Brandon, thinking about how you thought the game as a player versus how you have to think the game as a coach? Like, I guess my question is, while you were playing, did you think about the game and try to process it from a coaching perspective? In other words, maybe trying to understand what all five guys on the floor are doing and how the scheme fit into the overall plan or philosophy of what you were trying to do? Or were you more just like, hey, here's my job, I've got to do that as a player? And then just talk about maybe the shift from understanding the schemes and the X's and O's philosophy from how you thought about it as a player to how you had to think about it as a coach.
Yeah. I think the longer that I played, the more those types of things kind of click for you. So I would say probably more so when I was playing in Europe, you start to really understand, not just what I'm doing all the time, but like what's happening, what's happening behind you, what happened in front of you, and you start to see how everything is connected. And then that even trickles into like practice. right? You start to understand like, okay, well, we had 3 really light practices leading up to this game and we did not play well. We were soft, and you start to like kind of correlate things like that the longer that you play. And the one thing, as a player myself, I was never this unbelievable athlete. I was never like just a dead eye shooter, so I was solid in a lot of things, but I wasn't elite at any one thing. So I had to find those other advantages, and so I kind of craved and needed the scouting reports and those little like advantage type things that coaches provide. And so even as a player, I really valued those things because that's where I could potentially beat some of these guys that were naturally more gifted than I was. And so kind of knowing that like that's where I got a lot of my success from, then, stepping into coaching from that X's and O's standpoint to see, where you can get your advantages. I think that's, as I played, that really kind of transitioned really well into that coaching and understanding and valuing just the minute detail that can get you 2 points, right? That can or take away 2 points of theirs, that can help you win the game. And so, yeah, I think it definitely clicked for me a little bit the longer I played. But then once you really get onto the coaching side, then you really are like, your eyes are broadened out.
Right. Trying to figure out how to win on the margins, right? I think a lot of times as a player, you're seeing maybe if you're thinking about the big picture, you're thinking about it really from a 360-degree view. You're high up. It's a 30,000 foot looking down. Whereas in the coaching profession, right, you're looking for every single little edge. Maybe as a player, you're doing that again, but you're doing it more for yourself. You're not necessarily thinking about how you can do that for the other 4 guys on the floor. But once you get to coaching, now you're talking about all those little margins that if you can win all the margins, a lot of times that translates in the difference between losing a game by 2 and winning a game by 2.
Yeah. And I think too, kind of remembering what you saw and what you felt as a player, trying not to forget that piece too, because it's really easy on film to say, see, that guy's open, right? But we're able to pause, we're able to see this window, but that happens so fast. And to just keep that in mind of like, all right, I've been asked to do this before. I know how hard this is, but I know it can be done. But I also understand, like, if I'm asking you to do something that's really difficult, I do need to keep that in mind because I know I've been asked to do this before and it's a 50-50 shot here, just if we're being honest, because there are some things that we're going to do as a coach that, I hope this works. So, I do think trying to keep that mentality in the back of my mind, it has been really, really useful to be able to then talk to the players to tell them like, listen, I know this is difficult. I know this is hard, but I also know that this can be done. I know that if we do this right, it's going to work. And then, okay, then they can buy into it and understand rather than just, militarism all the time. So.
Right. And I think that's being able to have that understanding. I can think back to, and again, I played a long time ago, but I can think back to moments like listening to you just describe that situation of talking about the window and knowing as a player, like you're watching it on film. And I can remember sitting on my stool in the locker room, watching VHS tapes trying to be rewound back to plays and just whatever. And thinking and seeing it on film and just being like, yeah, like I know it's there in that split second that we pause the tape, but the reality is that almost what you're asking me to do in that situation, there's so many different things going on that like you can't. And it's interesting when you think about decision making, right? That nobody's going to make a decision correctly 100% of the time. And even if they did, what you might think is the right decision as a coach on the sideline might not actually be the right decision for the player in that particular moment with their skill set or with what they see and whatever else it could be. And I think that when you talk about decisions, it's more like the cumulative effect of all the decisions. Do they get us to the outcome that we're trying to get to? And I think sometimes it is easy, as you said, as a coach, to forget what players see and how fast the game is moving when they make a decision. And so that's where I think, right, the learning process and talking about the margins and the things that you can show a player that are going to help them to make the correct decision more frequently, but with the understanding that 100% correct decisions are probably A, impossible, and B, we probably don't even agree on what that correct decision is every single time. So yeah, it is interesting to think about it from that perspective in terms of trying to teach and help your players and ultimately your team to get to whatever it is the outcome that you want, whether it's offensively or defensively, however that may go. So tell me about going to Utah.
Yeah. So 2 awesome years at Utah State, unique years. Our first one won the Mountain West tournament championship. Sam Merrill hits the shot at the buzzer to beat San Diego State. Then the tournament gets canceled. That was a special group that probably could have done something in the NCAA tournament. Then the next year being COVID year, another great year. And a great team, definitely a different looking team, but we made the tournament as an at-large. So, and the year before I had gotten there, they had made the NCAA tournament as well. So 3 straight NCAA tournaments for Craig, 2 that I was able to be a part of. And so then he got the job at Utah, and I was obviously fortunate enough to be hired there. I was the director of scouting. That was a brief time that I was there. I was only there for, I think it was like 7 months or something crazy. But I mean, it was definitely a learning experience because, you're just, all right, now your expectations are through the roof, and now we're recruiting a different caliber of player. We're playing against a different caliber of player and coach, and it's night in, night out. There were the biggest difference that we saw was, not that there were nights off, but I mean, if you came with your B+ game, you were probably going to lose. Versus, at Utah State, we had some really, really talented teams, and there were nights maybe we didn't play our best, but we could still win. And so getting up to that level, I mean, it's just, it's a brutal grind for sure. But in terms of that opportunity, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, that was my first full-time gig. And so I was able to work in a lot of different aspects. As a GA, I was doing a lot of operation stuff. So then as the director of scouting at Utah, I was taking on more of a role of helping with some scouts and helping with recruiting. I wasn't on the road. I wasn't calling kids and doing that stuff, but I was helping out with the process. So I was kind of expanding my roles and what I could do there. And all working obviously for an awesome coach, an awesome person. So that was great. Our team that first year, wasn't awesome, but it was a really fun group to be around. That's the one thing about Craig Smith that I've always loved is like the people that he attracts and the practice and the environment that he provides every day is a joy to be around. A joy to be a part of literally every day. I don't know how he does it. It could be the cups of coffee he has. He has a couple every day, and so I've probably taken after him a little bit that way. But no, I loved being there. We loved living in Salt Lake. It's an awesome city. It's an awesome town. So wish we could have been there longer, but obviously a great opportunity came up for me to be an assistant coach and on the road recruiting and, being hands-on for the first time at South Dakota.
Yeah. Talk about just being able to take on that full-time role and be able to be on the floor, be able to recruit, to be able to do all the things when somebody thinks about the role that an assistant coach has. You're stepping up into all of those different opportunities to be able to grow yourself and really work on your craft. So just talk about how that's impacted you, just your own growth as a coach to be able to have that more responsibility that you've had at South Dakota.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're not on the floor, you're not presenting the scout, you're not in, you haven't watched all the games and you haven't cut it all yourself. I think it's easy to have an opinion of what you think, like, man, we should have done this.
Right.
But then when it's yours, right? It's, you're the one recruiting the kid. You're the one that's, you've watched all the stuff, or you have the scout. It's just like you understand things way more fully to see the broader picture, and fully grasp, the amount of work, but also, there's decisions that go into all of this stuff, and you have to think things through fully, and you got to really cover all your bases and make sure you're really doing the work. And I think that was a little bit eye-opening, but also like exciting, because it was like, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to like be the one to make a decision there, to say, this is the guy I believe in, and here's his number. Or, I think we should change our ball screen coverage for this, and here is why, and then let's do it. Let's execute it. Let's work on it here in the next couple of days, and then we're going to do it. So that was an awesome opportunity, but also, kind of to your point, that there's a big world that you're stepping into. You're not just helping someone with the decision, you're making that decision now. So, taking on that responsibility and having the confidence in yourself, and having the confidence in the work that you're putting in, that yep, I've got this. I might not be right all the time, but I think the process, at least, I'm gonna believe in that. So,
how do you guys delegate roles there? Let's just say on the practice floor, in terms of, do you go offensive, defensive coordinators, everybody kind of coaching everything? Is it bigs and wings and guards? How do you guys divide up the responsibility on your staff?
Yeah, so we do position groups. So I was a big, so I coach the bigs. We do bigs, wings, guards. I'm sure that's pretty standard across the board. And then we do split up offensive coordinator and defensive. And then we play pretty unique style. We press. We're the number 2 tempo team in the country, and we press on every makes, misses, everything. So we had a guy that was in charge of the press portion of our defense. So I did the half court defense. I did a lot of that stuff in the scouting reports and things that way. So that's kind of how we divide it up. But as you know, everything is connected. So, you can't make a decision over here that won't affect a decision over here. So the way that we played offense, the way that we pressed, we kind of all had to collaborate on those things to make sure, right, are these things making sense for us? Are these things the same to where our guys are going to be able to execute and do this every possession?
To go along with that, when you guys are talking through and having meetings about how you're going to design your practices, what does that look like in terms of how much input do you as an assistant coach have into what goes on? Are you guys watching the film from the previous day's practice and then thinking, hey, we got to work on this? Obviously, during the season, you're looking at game film and trying to figure out, hey, what do we need to work on between now and the next game? But just what's the practice planning process like for you guys as a staff?
Yeah, our head coach definitely kind of has an outline of and kind of a general plan of what he wants to get done in that day. And then, we kind of send, whether it's a few thoughts or a few things that we think we need to get done, and then we'll all meet and talk about, like, how can we get these things done? What can we tweak? Where can we, should we do this? Should we break this down into a half court thing first, or should we just throw it and see what happens? And so I would say there's a lot of ideas that come in. Our head coach has an idea of what he wants to get done that day too. And then we kind of all talk things through and maybe make some tweaks to everything here and there. I think in terms of, we do watch the practices from the day before. We do a version of the analytics stuff that the guys at Stanford, previously Washington State and San Francisco, and that whole, where we're charting certain things and have certain values for, defensive execution errors and deflections and steals and all that kind of stuff. So then we're able to see, like, all right, we had 17 screen and roll errors. Tomorrow we need to dial in on our screen and roll defense. So I think there's a little bit of both of those things going on all at once. I think the biggest challenge, I guess, with that is trying not to skip steps, and understanding, like, we don't have everything in, but it'll come if we start from the bottom and we build up.
Absolutely.
Because there's just so many things you want to do. And it's hard to rein yourself back in and just say, okay, like, we'll get there eventually, but let's work on guarding the ball first.
That is so funny, Brandon, because I think that sentiment that you just shared, I think you could talk to any coach at any level of basketball. And I think about when I've coached my own kids, whether it's their travel team or AAU team, and going back to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and just being like, man, if we could only get this in, or we could only do that. And man, if we could have 3 practices a week instead of 2, imagine how much we could get done. And even now, like, I have my daughter is, who I told you about before, she's in 9th grade and coaching her AAU team. And I just help out with the team. And the number of times that our head coach will say to me, he's like, man, if I was a high school coach and I had the girls 5 days a week for an hour and a half or 2 hours, could you imagine all the stuff that we could do? And I'm like, you just would want to do more. You would never feel like you had enough time. You'd always want to do more. And I think that's just endemic to the coaching profession. And to your point, that goes to, obviously, I asked you about the day-to-day planning, but what you're talking about goes to the bigger, I'm sure that's kind of what you guys are doing now, right? Is almost mapping out, knowing what the rhythm is from season to season of, hey, we know it's going to take, again, every team is probably a little bit different, but we know it's going to take 10 days to be able to get in X. And then once we have that down, then we can add on Y and so forth. And so it's kind of the daily practice planning is one thing, but then sort of the bigger picture of curriculum, for lack of a better way of saying it, of kind of what that rhythm's going to be like. I'm sure that's what you guys are partly doing in the off season, is trying to plan out, hey, what does that look like over the summer in terms of the player development, then as we get into the fall, and then obviously into the real meat of the preseason to be able to practice to get your team ready to play a game. I'm sure that's all a piece of it.
For sure. And that's, you want to know what are we getting done today, but also what are we building to? And it's just, man, you can't forget that in January when we're getting ready to play South Dakota State and we're playing them in 2 days. And, we want to add this thing and we want to take this away, but we also, like, we got to keep making sure we're really good at what we do. And that's the thing that's like, you kind of got to always remind yourself, is like, especially nowadays where I think you have so many teams that are going to have so many new guys every year. It's rare that you're going to see a kid that's like, okay, I've been here for 3 years or 4 years. And so I just know what's going on. So you can get to all those things, it's rare that you're going to see that now. So just trying to keep it as simple as possible, while also being able to add where you need, and to have your change up, have the curveball thing that can win you a game, because those things do win you games. But also understanding, like, all right, if we play 31 games in our regular season, if we're really good at these 4 things, we'll probably win 26. But if we start trying to be really good at 15 things, then are we really going to be good enough? So that's the battle constantly, is just, there are so many things that you can do, but should we? and that's the thought. Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially in today's world where you can go and you can find, hey, check out this cool clip on Twitter. Hey, check out this thing that somebody's doing on YouTube, or man, we could really start looking at that. And again, I'm sure that you, over the course of your career, have talked to so many assistant coaches that, again, they're just grabbing stuff and trying to build, right, your portfolio of things that you're thinking about that maybe at some point, if you were to get an opportunity to be a head coach, you're kind of building, hey, I like this, I like that. And there's a million things that I can go through and scroll on Twitter for 15 minutes and be like, wow, I love that. And that's cool. And let's try this. But to your point, you got to put the base in first and make sure that you're able to do the things that, you need to do in order to be able to have the kind of success that you're talking about. If you can't do the 4 things that are the most important to you as a program, if you're just okay at thing 22, it's probably not going to help you win very many games, as opposed to being good at the baseline things that you really need to be good at. To me, that always seems like it's clearly the most important thing.
Yeah. The way we play with our press now has really cleared that up, because there are things that they're all great, and these are great things to do, but they don't fit with how we're playing, and so that's been awesome to just be like, man, that was a really cool thing that they did defensively, but like we're not going to do that, because
right, exactly,
we're going to be pressing and we're going to be doing these things. We're going to be creating more chaos. So it's been nice to be able to then like have that thought of like, okay, regardless of what style of play you're playing, the things got to make sense. They got to make sense together, whether that's offensively, defensively, or we call them special teams, right? Our end outs, side outs, things like that. They got to be all connected, and that's been one really clarifying thing, and it's been great for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that, right? That the style of play kind of dictates, all right, if we're going to do anything, it's got to be within the confines of this style of play, and it eliminates a lot of the shiny new toys that you might peek at over here, and you're like, yeah, that doesn't really fit what we're trying to do. And obviously, as you're going up and down the floor, both offensively and defensively, you're playing a style of play that everybody, when you ask coaches, right, or when you ask players, well, how do you want to play? Everybody says, right, we want to run, we want to play at a fast pace. That's what everybody says, and yet not everybody plays that way, and it takes a certain mentality. And I'm always really impressed when I see teams that just get the ball down the floor offensively, and teams that immediately can transition, that quick transition from offense to defense or from defense to offense. When you're talking about a team that's playing the style like you guys, to me, that first half second when there's a transition, whether it's a rebound, a steal, a made basket, going either direction, to me, that whatever half second in that transition is really, I'm sure, where you guys make your money. How do you teach that?
It's not easy. I think a lot of it starts this summer, right? We got to get in shape. Yeah. Because if you're playing that way, you're playing really hard and you're putting a lot of effort into both sides of the basketball. Pressing 94 feet every possession takes it out of you. So I think that's the first thing, but it is a mentality, right? Where there's going to be sloppiness. They're going to get a layup, right? They're going to get an open 3 on the back end of our press. It's going to happen. We hope it doesn't happen very much, but if it does, we move on, right? It's got to be next play. Like, we have to take the ball out of the net and go, because how many teams do you watch that hit a 3 and they're all celebrating or whatever? And if we have the right mentality, right, and now they're 2 steps behind, right? For sure. And so and it starts in practice, and it starts literally day one in practice of offensively, right? In a skill workout, the guy misses a shot, hangs his head. No, you got to nip that in the bud right away. Because not only for that player's self-confidence, but for how we're going to play, like, no, man, you got to move on, right? We're going to have turnovers because we're playing so fast, right? We might dribble it off our foot one time, and you got to move on, right? That's part of it. And so half of that is on our end of understanding, like, Mistakes are going to happen. We're going to give up a layup, and that's okay, which is really hard to do as a coach. But then to instill that in the players, and it is fun once it's instilled, because then you see their minds free up, to where, okay, like I can make a mistake and it's not the end of the world. They can score and it's not the end of the world. I can miss a shot. It's not the end of the world. And so they're never going to look over their shoulder. They're never going to wonder, am I going to come out because I didn't do whatever? Now we have our non-negotiables, of course,
Sure,
like anybody does. But I think once it clicks, then your mind is freed to just play and play really hard, and that's where we've kind of made our hay this last year.
and it's really important as a player to not have to look over your shoulder. I think you talk to any player who's played the game at any kind of a level, and if you have to look over your shoulder because you think that buzzer is going to hit anytime you make a mistake, you and I both know that there's no way to play at your best when that's the way that you're playing the game, looking over your shoulder. It just doesn't work. And if you can get that mentality out of your players and allow them to play free and loose, and I think playing at a fast tempo, once you get them to, as you said, to train them to be able to to make sure that they all know what's expected of them, that then you have the best chance of getting the most out of them. All right, I want to ask you one final two-part question before we get out of here. Part one, when you think about the next year or two, what do you see as being your biggest challenge? Second part of the question, when you think about what you get to do every day, what brings you the most joy? So your biggest challenge and then your biggest joy.
Yeah, biggest challenge. That's an awesome question. I think the biggest challenge we've over especially the next year or two, we've built over the last 3 years, started to build this culture and building up to winning, and we won 19 games last year, and that was a great step forward. And now it's maintaining, it's making that a program, right? Getting over the hump, getting to we want to win a championship, but we don't want to just win one time. We want to sustain it. We want to build to where we're winning year in, year out. And, we all know who those programs are, and you could look at a league and pick them out too. And I think it's a biggest challenge. It's exciting because I think we're in position to do it. And we've brought guys back, and we have retained a ton over the last 3 years, and including this season. We haven't lost too much into the portal, which has been great. But I think that's the biggest challenge is not just having success, but sustaining it year in, year out, and continuing to bring in the right type of guys, the right people. And then I would say the biggest joy is when we are able to do that. The guys that have come in and maybe they redshirted, or maybe they transferred in because they didn't have an opportunity somewhere else, and to see them go from this in here and just blossom and getting that opportunity, and them realizing it themselves, like, man, I'm getting way better. Man, I'm like, I have an opportunity. I have somebody that believes in me. That has been the biggest joy for me. Just a couple of specific examples, like Caleb Stewart. He's a kid from Houston. We recruited him out of the portal, came from Louisiana Tech, and just had a spot role, was kind of in and out of the lineup, came in and averaged almost 20 points a game for us. And it took him a little while to kind of be like, oh, like I can do that. I can shoot. You want me to attack like that? Oh, okay. And then just to see him like become not just a leading scorer, our leader and a voice on the team. And now he's going to go overseas and play professionally. Like, that's awesome. And then we have some freshmen that redshirted for us, and now we're playing 20 plus minutes a game, and it's just seeing those guys, whatever their circumstance has been, to come in one way and grow on and off the court in so many different ways and blossom. That's been by far the biggest joy for me.
being able to use the game of basketball to impact those kids, not only in terms of what they're able to do on the basketball floor, but as you said, to be able to grow as people off the court. It's one of the best things about being a coach, is being able to use basketball to be able to do that. All right. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to share, how can people connect with you, find out more about your program, share email, social media, website, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Yeah, I guess my social media is just all at Brandon Ubel. I kept it pretty simple. UBEL is my last name. And then, yeah, I mean, just our website, brandon.ubel@usd.edu. I think if you want to watch a very unique but very fun brand of basketball, goyotes.com is our site. I think some of them are streamed on there. I think Midco does an awesome job. But if you ever see us on national TV, tune in, because it is a ton of fun, and would love to hear anything or anybody to connect and ask questions or whatever, or just share any thoughts, because what we are doing is very unique, but also we know there's room to grow and room to improve and all kinds of things. And even if it's just to talk shop or connect or whatever, I'm always open to that. So yeah, anything and everything. Would love for people to watch us play, but also would love for people to connect with me if they want to do that as well.
Brandon, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to join us. Really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening. And we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.